Elliot Grey's hands tightened around the leather steering wheel as the towering glass facade of Wexford Estate reflected the early morning sun. He kept his eyes down steady on the dashboard clock. And 45 a.m. Just another shift. Just another day. The estate's courtyard buzzed quietly, the soft hum of luxury cars, the sharp clicks of designer heels, and the low-practice greetings of staff members trained to serve without being seen. And no one ever saw him. Not really. He was the driver. No one asked his name. No one cared to know. Until today. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air sharp and panicked. Entschuldigen Sie. Kann denn hier wirklich niemand Deutsch? Heads turned toward the commotion. A tall man in a tailored suit stood near the central fountain, pacing phone in hand. His voice grew louder, more frantic with every word. Staff exchanged nervous glances. No one moved. No one answered. Elliot felt his chest tighten. He knew those words. He understood them. But drivers weren't meant to speak, especially not to guests. His manager, Marcus Price, stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. He didn't move either. The guest's voice cracked with desperation. Please, someone. I need help. Elliot's grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles turning white. The polished leather beneath his fingers felt like it might tear under the pressure. His chest rose and fell in short, sharp breaths. His mind screamed at him to stay put. This isn't your place. Keep your head down. You'll ruin everything. But his body moved anyway. He reached for the door handle, his hand trembling. The click of the door unlocking sounded like a gunshot in the tense morning air. Elliot stepped out of the Bentley boots, landing softly on the wet stone drive. Every muscle in his body screamed to turn back, but he didn't. The courtyard fell silent as he approached the distressed guest. Valets stopped mid-step. The concierge froze mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the driver, the man they had never once acknowledged. Elliot swallowed hard, forced his shoulders back, and cleared his throat softly. Then, in perfect fluent German, he spoke. Wie kann ich Ihnen helfen? Mein Herr? The reaction was instant. Gasps, sharp whispers. A wave of disbelief rippling through the staff. A driver, speaking German, Elliot felt the weight of every stare burning into his skin like a spotlight. He wasn't supposed to do this. He knew that. But the guest, his face seconds ago tight with panic, lit up with relief. Elliot listened calmly, nodding as the man spoke rapidly into his phone. He translated the instructions back to the concierge with precision. Within minutes, the entire crisis dissolved. The guest gave Elliot a grateful nod before walking away, leaving behind a courtyard thick with silence. Elliot exhaled softly, but the breath caught halfway in his chest. Because even as the guest disappeared into the grand entrance, Elliot felt something colder settle over him. From the shadowed archway, Victor Wexford stepped into view. No introductions, no smiles, no questions. His sharp gaze locked onto Elliot, a blade without a sheath. Elliot's stomach twisted. His pulse roared in his ears. What have I done? Was this it? Did I just throw everything away? Victor's voice cut through the silence like thunder. You, in my office. Now. Victor turned without waiting for a response, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Elliot followed his own steps, heavy as if the ground itself tried to pull him backward. Every turn they took felt tighter. Every breath felt heavier. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have spoken. You've gone too far. They reached a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. Victor pushed it open without looking back. Elliot hesitated for a split second, then stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound sealed his fate. Victor turned slowly, his expression unreadable. His voice came low, razor-sharp. You spoke German. Elliot's throat tightened. His mind scrambled for the right words, an excuse, an apology, anything. But all that came out was the simple truth. Yes, sir. I just wanted to help. Victor didn't respond right away. He took a slow step forward, studying Elliot like he was something new. Something unexpected. How many languages Elliot's breath hitched? He could lie. He could play it down. But why bother? It was already out. So he stood straighter, voice steady. 5, sir. German, French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Victor raised one eyebrow, a flicker of something interest disbelief crossing his face. 5. Elliot nodded once, bracing himself for the fallout. And no one here knew Elliot didn't flinch. No one asked. The door creaked open again. Marcus Price appeared leaning casually against the frame arms, crossed eyes narrowing as they flicked between Elliot and Victor. His voice slid through the room smooth as ever, but laced with something colder. A warning disguised as professionalism. "This isn't about languages," Sir Marcus said tightly. "This is about order. Drivers don't speak to guests. It undermines the chain of command." Elliot felt the heat rise in his chest. He turned facing Marcus fully for the first time. His voice was low, steady, but carried something sharp beneath the surface. "Maybe the chain needs breaking." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. You could almost hear the ripples spreading through the heavy silence. Marcus's jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. But before either man could push the tension further, Victor raised a hand, cutting the air cleanly. "Enough." Victor's gaze shifted back to Elliot, measuring him like a man trying to decide if he'd just found gold or set fire to his own house. "I want to know more about you." Hours later, under the hum of flickering fluorescent lights, Elliot sat across from Victor in the estate's private office. The room smelled faintly of aged leather and wood polish, lined with towering shelves of expensive books artwork that cost more than Elliot had ever earned in a year. But despite all that, the space felt small tight, like the walls themselves were inching closer with every second. Victor leaned forward, elbows resting on the edge of the desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His voice when it came was lower, more personal. "You didn't just pick up 5 languages by accident." "What's your story, Elliot?" Elliot shifted in his seat, the leather creaking softly beneath him. "Tell him nothing. Keep it vague. Protect yourself." That voice had served him for years, but tonight, it failed to reach him. He let out a breath and leaned back, eyes flicking toward the window to the faint outline of the city skyline in the distance. A life that once felt so within reach and now so far away. "I was studying languages at Cambridge, top of my class." The words felt alien in his mouth, like they belonged to someone else now. "But when my father passed, I had to drop out. My sister, she was still in school. She needed me." Elliot swallowed hard. "I needed work." His gaze dropped to his hands, calloused fingers that had spent years gripping a steering wheel, never holding on to anything that felt like a future. "Driving was what I found. It paid the bills." Victor leaned back slowly. His jaw flexed once, but when he spoke again, his voice had softened just barely. "And you've been here ever since," Elliot nodded. "No one ever asked about my past. No one really cared to know. I became background noise." He let the words settle like ash between them. For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Then quietly, almost like a man making a promise to himself more than to Elliot, Victor spoke. "You're not background noise anymore." But before Elliot could fully process those words, Victor leaned back again, crossing his arms across his chest. The softness in his face darkened, hardened back into the mask of a man who ran an empire. "Still, not everyone here will like this. You stepping out of line, it will threaten people." Elliot nodded, the weight of that truth already heavy on his shoulders. He knew exactly who those people were. And Marcus Price was first on that list. The news spread through Wexford Estate faster than wildfire. It shot down marble hallways, through the staff kitchens, even into the chauffeur's lounge. Elliot Grey, the driver, had been promoted. International guest liaison. By mid-morning, it seemed like every corner of the estate had something to say. The driver. Seriously, it's just for show. Give it a week, he'll be back polishing chrome in the garage. Victor's losing his touch. He's playing favorites. The words followed Elliot like shadows clinging to his heels with every step he took. He heard every single one, but his pace never slowed. His jaw clenched tighter, his shoulders squared higher. Let them talk. He was done shrinking to fit their expectations. Victor wasted no time. By afternoon, Elliot was standing in front of a massive conference table surrounded by executives in suits, all flipping through guest profiles like he didn't belong in the room. Every step felt like walking a tightrope above a pit of knives. He was expected to observe, learn, perform all at once. No one held his hand. No one slowed down for him. No one explained the unsaid rules. And in the shadows, Marcus Price watched. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, after a grueling briefing on diplomatic protocol, Elliot slumped onto a chair in the staff lounge, rubbing the tension from his neck. Marcus appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, leaning just far enough to seem casual, but his eyes sharp as broken glass. Long way from the driver's seat, Grey. Elliot tensed, looking up cautiously. What do you want, Marcus? Marcus pushed off the doorframe, stepping closer with a predatory smile. Relax. I'm offering you a hand. Elliot's eyes narrowed suspicion, prickling the back of his neck. Marcus dropped into the seat across from him, his voice low, measured, dangerously smooth. You're out of your depth. I can show you how to stay afloat. Who to impress. Who to avoid. Elliot wanted to laugh, wanted to walk away, but the truth was he was out of his depth, and Victor wasn't giving him a map. He studied Marcus carefully. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea, but he needed help. He needed any edge he could get. Elliot leaned forward slightly, voice low. All right, I'm listening. Over the next several days, Marcus played the part perfectly. He walked Elliot through estate politics, introduced him to key staff, and whispered subtle warnings about who held real power behind the scenes. He even handed Elliot dossiers guest files marked latest revisions, assuring him they were flawless. And for a while, Elliot wanted to believe it. Maybe Marcus wasn't the enemy after all. But no matter how smooth Marcus sounded, no matter how helpful he pretended to be, something didn't sit right. Something about the way Marcus's smile never quite reached his eyes. Every hallway hummed with low conversations. Security teams moved like clockwork, checking cameras and radioing status updates. Executive staff triple-checked table settings, sound systems, and diplomatic protocol books. Tonight, Wexford Manor was hosting the European Trade Summit, an event so exclusive that even the estate's own senior management whispered about it like it was royalty arriving. And at the center of it all, Victor had handed Elliot Grey the responsibility of personally greeting Ambassador LeBlanc, a man whose influence could make or break Wexford's international expansion. Elliot sat alone in the operations lounge, eyes scanning the dossier Marcus had given him. He memorized every detail: names, faces, cultural notes, preferred greetings. He whispered the words under his breath in perfect French, testing every syllable until it felt natural. I won't let Victor down. Not tonight. As the first wave of black diplomatic vehicles rolled up the estate's front drive, Elliot stood at the top of the grand staircase, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He could feel eyes on him, staff guests, executives, waiting to see if the driver-turned-liaison would actually pull this off. One by one, guests stepped out of their cars. Elliot greeted them smoothly, switching from French to Italian, then to Spanish, each time earning polite nods of approval. But the last car, that was the one that mattered. The final vehicle pulled up a sleek black Mercedes with French diplomatic plates. Elliot wiped his palms on the inside of his jacket, straightened his shoulders, and stepped forward. He opened the door with practiced confidence, extended his hand, and spoke clearly, smoothly, in flawless French, "Welcome, Ambassador Dufour." The man who stepped out froze, his jaw tightened, eyes narrowing into thin slits. Excuse me. The ambassador snapped his voice, cutting through the air like glass. I am Ambassador LeBlanc. Dufour hasn't represented us for 2 months. The energy in the room cracked. A ripple of shock spread like a wave across the marble floor. Whispers ignited. Glances exchanged. Polite masks slipped into poorly hidden smirks. The driver just humiliated himself in front of the entire diplomatic floor. Elliot felt his throat close. His face burned hot like someone had flipped on a spotlight. The wrong name, the wrong profile, the wrong everything. And then he heard it. A soft, knowing laugh coming from the direction of the bar. Elliot turned just enough to see Marcus Price lifting his glass, sipping slowly, watching with a smile so sharp it could have cut glass. As the guests filed into the dining hall, Elliot stood frozen for a moment longer, until the last diplomat disappeared beyond the gold-trimmed double doors. You trusted him. You let him set you up. His legs felt like stone as he turned down the side corridor away from the glimmering lights and polite laughter. Every step felt heavier than the last. Every breath felt thicker. Victor hadn't said a word. Not yet. But he would. And when he did, Elliot swallowed hard bitterness curling in his chest. This is it. Back to the garage. Or worse. It was nearly midnight by the time Elliot pushed open the door to his tiny apartment on the edge of town. The peeling paint on the walls caught the flicker of a dying kitchen light. The radiator hummed weakly, barely warming the air. But this place, small, tired, forgotten, was still home. And right now, it felt like the only place left where he could fall apart. In the next room, Sophia, his teenage sister, was hunched over a pile of textbooks on the floor. Earbuds and hoodie pulled tight around her face. Elliot stood quietly for a moment, watching her, remembering how small she'd been the day he dropped out of Cambridge. How scared she'd been when their father's heart gave out without warning. How he had promised her, "I'll take care of us." He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding and sank onto the worn-out couch head in his hands. For the first time in years, he let the weight hit him. What am I doing? Who am I kidding? The words spun like poison in his mind. He had climbed out of the garage. But he was still just the driver in their eyes. A joke, a stunt. The apartment felt colder than usual. The dim yellow light from the street lamp outside bled through the thin curtains, pooling softly on the floor where Sophia sat hunched over her textbooks. She had her earbuds in, head bobbing slightly to some song only she could hear. Elliot stood frozen at the door for a moment, watching her. How many nights had he come home like this? Too exhausted to speak, too numb to feel, he let out a shaky breath, crossed the room, and dropped heavily onto the worn-out couch. His head sank into his hands, elbows on his knees, the weight of every failure crashing down all at once. This was it, wasn't it? The end of the illusion. The end of everything. He didn't even notice Sophia had taken her earbuds out. She turned when she heard him exhale, not the usual tired sigh, but something heavier, more defeated. She stood, walked over quietly, and sat cross-legged on the old wooden coffee table facing him. Her voice barely more than a whisper. "You're home early." Elliot didn't look up. "Doesn't feel like home tonight." Sophia frowned, pulling the sleeves of her hoodie over her hands. What happened? For a long moment, he couldn't find the words. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The knot in his throat burned. Finally, the truth spilled out in a bitter breath. "I messed up. In front of everyone. They're probably laughing right now. Waiting for Victor to send me back to the garage." Sophia leaned in, studying him carefully, like she was searching for the brother she knew was still in there. "Is that what you believe? That one mistake, after everything you've done, means you're finished?" Elliot swallowed hard, afraid that if he opened his mouth again, he'd break apart. He didn't trust his voice. Sophia scooted closer, her voice firmer now. "You promised me something once. You said we don't quit Elle. Not when it matters." Elliot let out a sharp breath, pressing his palms against his face, his shoulders trembling ever so slightly. What if they already decided I'm nothing more than a driver? What if none of it mattered? He finally choked the words out. What if they've already made up their minds? Sophia didn't hesitate. She reached out, gripping his hand tight. "Then make them see you're more." Her words hung in the stillness of the room, wrapping around him like a lifeline he didn't realize he'd been waiting for. And slowly, Elliot straightened his back, planting both feet firmly on the ground. His breathing slowed, his jaw set. The next morning, the city felt colder. As Elliot approached the Wexford Estate, the gates seemed to loom taller, the whispers sharper, but something had shifted inside him. "We don't quit. Not when it matters." He kept repeating her words with every step. As Elliot stepped into the staff lounge, all eyes turned to him. Some faces showed curiosity. Others, those who had already written him off, wore smug satisfaction, waiting for him to pack up and leave. But Elliot didn't flinch. He walked straight to the operations desk, picked up every guest profile, and started checking every single detail himself. Alone, silently, relentlessly. Day after day, Elliot rebuilt what Marcus had tried to tear down. He cross-checked every guest list. He personally verified every translation. He kept detailed notes after every interaction, slowly, quietly. The estate began to shift. Guests began asking for him by name. "Send Grey, he understands us. Where's Elliot?" He handled it perfectly last time. And with every small victory, his confidence returned. Not loud, not arrogant. Solid, unshakable, earned. But Marcus wasn't done. He started whispering to the other executives. Elliot's making moves, watching everyone. Too ambitious. And then Elliot noticed his calendar wiped clean. Meetings gone. Access to Victor's office blocked. And then, a formal summons landed on his desk. Mandatory internal review. Allegations of misconduct. Elliot stared at the letter in his hands, his jaw clenched. He's trying to end me. Again. But this time, Elliot wasn't walking into the trap blind. He was ready. Elliot stood slowly, his pulse thudding in his ears so loud it almost drowned out the hush that had fallen over the room. Every pair of eyes followed him, curious, calculating, waiting for him to stumble. Marcus watched too, arms crossed, face unreadable. So sure of his victory, but Elliot didn't flinch. He reached into his leather folder, his hands steady now like he'd waited his whole life for this moment. One by one, he laid down the stack of documents on the polished oak table. Time-stamped guest confirmations, printed meeting calendars, email receipts showing sabotage appointments, deleted information, altered all traced directly to Marcus's account. The air shifted, like someone had cracked open a door in a sealed room. A few board members leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Whispers stirred, soft murmurs spreading like a slow-moving wave. And just when Marcus opened his mouth to dismiss it all, click. The soft, mechanical sound of an audio recorder filled the room. Elliot's voice didn't waver as the recording began to play. You're out of your depth, Grey. But if you want to survive, you'll do what I tell you. Marcus's voice, clear, unmistakable. Poison caught on tape. The boardroom fell dead silent. No breathing, no shifting, not a sound. Elliot let the silence hang, then turned to face Victor directly. His voice was steady. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. He's been sabotaging me from the start, sir. I didn't want to believe it. I gave him every chance. But now, you've heard it for yourself. Victor sat back slowly in his chair, his jaw-clenched eyes darkening as they locked onto Marcus. Is this true? Marcus's face drained of color, the smugness melting into panic. He opened his mouth once, twice, but the words never came. Elliot could see the truth breaking across Marcus's face like a crack in glass. He was done. Victor stood, his voice low, measured, final. Get out. Your services are no longer required here. No shouting, no theatrics, just the end. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he gathered his papers. No one spoke. No one stopped him. And when the door finally clicked shut behind him, it was over. For a long moment, the room stayed frozen, like the air itself was still catching up with what had just happened. Elliot stood there, still breathing heavily, waiting for the judgment he feared would come next. Would they turn on him? Would they dismiss him anyway? Had he gone too far? But instead, Victor leaned forward, and for the first time since Elliot had stepped into this world, he smiled. A rare, genuine, real smile. You fought the right way. Elliot's throat tightened, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was something else, something stronger. Victor turned to the rest of the board, his voice steady and commanding. Let me make something clear to all of you. Elliot Grey belongs here. From this day forward, he will lead all international guest relations. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest, but this time he stood straighter, taller. This wasn't luck. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a favor. This was earned. Later that evening, Elliot stood alone in the grand lobby of Wexford Estate. Everything around him looked exactly as it always had. The polished marble floors gleaming under chandeliers, the gold inlays catching the light just right. The quiet rhythm of guests checking in and out, their laughter drifting like background music. But for Elliot, everything had changed. For years, he had walked these halls as a shadow, the man holding the door. The driver waiting in the corner, the invisible piece no one cared to notice. But tonight, the same colleagues who used to whisper behind his back, who used to lower their voices when he passed, now nodded as they walked by small, silent gestures of acknowledgement. Even the guests, the ones who never bothered to glance his way, asked for him by name. And for the first time in a very long time, Elliot Grey felt seen. His phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He glanced down. A message from Sophia. I knew you'd show them Elle. Elliot closed his eyes just for a second, letting it all settle deep in his chest, the fear, the fight, the disbelief. And finally, the quiet victory. He had spent years believing he was just the driver. But standing there beneath the estate's towering glass ceiling, he finally understood. He had never been just the driver. And now, everyone knew it. He exhaled slowly, turning toward the estate's front doors. The cool night air hit him as he stepped outside, the distant city lights flickering like silent invitations. He didn't notice Victor Wexford until the older man appeared quietly at his side. Victor glanced at him, then spoke without preamble. Word spreading, Grey. A client in Geneva wants someone exactly like you to lead their new hospitality division. Elliot blinked, caught off guard. Me? Victor nodded, a rare smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I told them, you're the best we have. Elliot turned slightly, taking one last look at Wexford Estate, the place that had once felt like the end of the road. And then slowly he looked forward, toward the city lights ahead, toward something bigger, brighter his. He breathed in deep. Guess it's time to find out just how far this goes. Sometimes the ones the world ignores are the ones who rewrite the rules, and all it takes is refusing to stay invisible. If Elliot's journey inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and share this story. Help Real Life Stories new reach 10,000 subscribers so we can continue bringing you more powerful stories of real people breaking through the shadows. Your support makes all the difference.